Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be so fun. Thank you for showing up. We have an exciting live at 5. It's called Here for the Horses. This is a Sunday Zoom call that I run every Sunday. Generally, I talk about equine massage because that's kind of my field. But every once in a while, I get harebrained ideas to talk to other people about their specialty, especially if it has a little bit something to do with equine massage or body work. For most of you, you've known that I did the Winning Your Farrier's Heart, which is which was a great Zoom call I did with the famous Katie Garrett, and she talked to us all about hoof care and barefoot hoof care, and how to win your farrier's heart. So don't do things to make them mad. What it takes to get a horse to stand. What's important in the farrier world. Things that we don't think of. So that was fantastic. And that just kind of led me down the road. Obviously the horse's feet are super important for body work and how the horse moves. So that tied in really well with body work. So the second one I wanted to do was saddle fit, because saddle fit is so important. I'm sure all of you know that. But it's also one of those things that's really hard as a horse owner. We don't necessarily know what to look for. You can YouTube it a lot, but you really want to have the most information that you can get. So I have found, through my deep search, I have found Jen from High Plains Saddle Fitting. And Jen's amazing because she does a lot of short videos that are really informative and help us understand saddle fit a little bit more. It's such a crazy subject. There's just so much to learn. So her videos are awesome. You should definitely check them out. She's on Instagram, and we're going to get to that information at the end. But I want to welcome Jen from High Plains Saddle Fitting. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for coming. Here she is. So Jen, please tell us, I will stop talking at some point in time. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you got into, why you got into saddle fitting, how long you've been doing it, and also just kind of like what you like to do with horses.
Yeah, so I got into saddle fitting late. I actually just graduated my program a little bit over a year and a half ago. So I'm still, especially at this phase of my life, I'm in my 40s. I have another career that I had for a long time. This still feels at a year and a half new to me. But I actually am a hunter jumper. Um, I I have an Appaloosa and when I started working with a saddle fitter to get him fit, because he is a tricky fit, he's funky shaped. I realized in that process how much I didn't know. And I feel like I'm one of those people who I'm very much a both a like an art and a science brain. And it just, I went down some rabbit holes online and started learning a little bits and pieces of what I didn't know. And also um I I felt like, especially in the hunter jumper community, there is almost everybody around me lacked the same knowledge that I lacked. And I feel like people in the dressage community are a little bit like ahead of the game as far as saddle fitting goes. Maybe not ahead of the game, but with it. So I I really wanted to be able to learn and kind of help spread some awareness, within my community, and not just in the community, just in general, because I think that so many people just don't know the harms and what we're doing riding the same saddle or riding the same horse in every saddle, um, etc. And even like not putting the saddle in the proper place and not putting the girth in the proper place and so many things. I mean, it was like every corner I took, I was like, oh my gosh, we don't know this. We don't know this either. So, I started out actually in the very beginning in healthcare. My initial degree was in science and I like minored in math. So eventually, and I'm a hairdresser in my other life. So I like to do all the things, but I really want to help my horse friends and riding friends just have accessible information. And just kindly, like, no shame, no judgment information to help our horses and ourselves.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, some of the things that you said, like right off the bat, you said having one saddle that fits multiple horses, it's like, that's really common.
It still
So
happens all the time.
it's a problem. And
Yeah.
I remember one of my trainers, a trainer that I knew, she was like, yeah, my saddle fits all horses. And I just like right then I kind of went, oh my gosh, I know it doesn't.
Mhm.
I know it doesn't. I've seen that saddle too. It doesn't fit nothing.
Right.
So
It probably doesn't fit any of them.
exactly. But you know, they're like shoes to us also kind of, you know, like we like our own saddle. So we always want to ride in ours or what fits right. So it's tough and they're not cheap either. So
No,
it's
it's a big
hard
deal.
yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal, especially if you have a bunch of different horses. So all right. Well, thank you. Awesome. Thank you for being here. We're excited and I can't wait for this. It's gonna be fun, but we're gonna dive right in. Okay. So tell us, what are some signs the horse shows that the saddle doesn't fit?
So I kind of broke this up into two groups, both physical and emotional signs that they show us. I mean, even their emotional signs are physical, but so physical, one of the physical signs is if you ever palpate your horse, reaction during palpation is huge. Um, Generally, the reaction, I do have to say, has to be repeatable. So sometimes we palpate our horses and they react because it's a surprise and not because they're in pain. So it has to be a repeatable little note. Severe signs, physical signs are rubs in their fur, where they've got like little bald spots, white marks. We've all seen horses with white marks on their withers or elsewhere. Um, Dry spots under saddle pads, and even dry spots under, like, on their skin, which that can be kind of a loaded thing because sometimes those are indicative of issues and sometimes they're not. But if you have other signs along with that, that alone is not enough to say, oh, this is something going on. But paired with other things, I would say yes. Um, Atrophy of the trapezius. I think that you know one of the biggest steps in creating awareness out there is just horses that have huge hollows behind their withers. You know, it's usually a sign of something. A horse that's got a healthy back. You can have a horse with a high wither and not big hollows and like a clearly defined scapula. I think that when you've got big hollows and you can clearly see the edge of their scapula, you've got something going on, and very possibly it's saddle fit related. We also know it could be diet, it could be exercise. I mean, there's a lot of different factors at play, but so movement wise, I have seen front end lameness because of poor saddle fit. And sometimes that's because the nerves in the shoulder go down the legs. And so sometimes if one of those is hit in the wrong way, it's more of a nerve thing. Are they kicking out? Are they, especially like during transitions, are they biting? Are they pinning their ears? Are they anxious or unhappy while you're grooming and tacking them up? I think that those are all signs that we have to kind of listen to, that something could be going on.
Yeah, I've found it funny that sometimes when I think there's saddle fit issues, because I can generally tell if there's something going on with the saddle, I'll tell them to go get the saddle and then I'll just watch the horse. It's wild. The horse will give it away because they were in a relaxed state, right? They just got a massage and then all of a sudden the saddle starts coming up to them
And they're
and
like,
they change. So
mhm.
that is wild. I'm so glad you brought that up. We really need to pay attention to what the horse is trying to tell us through the cues that they're giving when we're in different situations, when factors change, because they'll tell us a lot of the time if we just pay enough attention. So that's fantastic. Hey, so what are the most important parts of the saddle for a proper fit?
So like most important is the correct tree shape. The tree is the bones of the saddle, and there are lots of different elements to the tree that make it the shape fit, not fit, whatever. So the front of the tree, the head plate, the shape of that, whether it's A or a wide A or a hoop, how much curve front to back, how much it comes up in the front to accommodate for a wither or lack thereof. The bars or the rails are what go front to back, and the angle of those should also match the angle of the back. So they're that's huge. Yeah, we did. There are a lot of trees, like the majority of the companies that I feel are the most, I don't know if I want to say trustworthy, but have multiple different tree shapes. And generally speaking, they build a tree with a typical horse in mind. So you've got like warm blood shaped trees, and you've got thoroughbred shaped trees and Iberian shaped trees, cob, all of these different things. And, obviously not every horse falls into the tree shape of its breed, but I think that's super important, that there are multiple tree shapes to accommodate the different back shapes. So then you also have the panels, or what is in between the tree and your horse's back. We have lots of different ways of ordering those to specific shapes to accommodate different shapes. Whether, if you've got a horse who's got a really high wither in a back that's kind of lower than its shoulder, then you want panels that are deep in the body of the saddle, but not necessarily in the front, to lift the saddle off the horse's back. You might want gussets to fill in the wither pockets or help balance. I mean, generally speaking, like the tree should fit the horse's back, but the panels are there to balance it in however it needs to be. The channel width is really important. So that's the distance in between the two panels. Once upon a time, we saw a lot of saddles with channels that were like 2 fingers wide. And I have pretty hard rules about that. I will never, ever, ever put a saddle on a horse that has less than 3 fingers, and even 3 fingers, it better be a really narrow horse.
So talk a little bit about the channel width then. Where is the channel? Why is it important? Why is it important that it's not too narrow? What does that have to do with the horse?
So you never want it to hit the bones of the horse. Basically, you don't want it hitting the horse's spine, and you want it wide enough to where it's actually sitting on the longissimus, which is basically on the sides of the spine, in between the spine and the rib cage, more or less. Which is essentially that is the part of the horse's back that's weight bearing, and it's because of the thoracic vertebrae. Hopefully, I'm not going too far.
Hey man, all my people know these words.
Right,
I be spitting this stuff out left and right, guys? Yeah.
It's because of the thoracic vertebrae's attachment to the ribs that part of the back is strong enough to hold our weight. That's why we're not supposed to have the saddle past the 18th rib or the 18th vertebrae, because the lumbar spine doesn't have that stability, and it has a lot more mobility. And it's just also the spinous processes, like the transverse processes that stick out the side. Oh, I wish I had my bones. I have some bones, are way wider at that point, and they're kind of sharp. So, there are a few reasons why it's not good to have a saddle past the 18th vertebrae. And there are also, like everything else in the world, there are exceptions to every rule. So, there's so many different rabbit holes we can go down.
Well, it's like, does anyone else cringe when there's a movie and you see 2 people riding one horse?
Yes.
I mean, honestly, I can't watch
Yes.
it anymore, especially 2
Mm-mm.
full-grown men jumping on a
Mm-hmm.
horse. I just, it's
I mean,
wild.
I still see it in videos on the interweb today, and I'm like, oh, ouch. Once you have seen what those bones look like, you can't go back from knowing that. So
Exactly.
so I guess proper fit for rider is important too. So like seat size, flap length, it used to be a thing where if you had a long leg, you had to have a big seat regardless of what size your butt is. Um, but luckily now we have all of these options to you can have a seat that appropriately fits your butt and you can extend the flap forward for a longer leg or vice versa for a shorter leg. So it is kind of a beautiful thing that we actually can accommodate riders better.
Yeah, I actually didn't believe in seat size too much because most seats I can kind of fit in. But
Yeah.
one time I had this very small friend and she wanted me to ride her horse. And I thought, oh, yeah, sure, I'll hop on real quick. And she had a 15-inch barrel saddle. Okay, so with the high back, my big old booty, I was like, I couldn't get in the seat and sit in it properly. And I thought it was the horse for a little bit. Like I thought she was really high in the back end, but it was actually that my butt did not fit in that
Like,
saddle. So
oh,
that was
well,
crazy.
and then what happens too is if you're putting too much weight on that cantle, it's going to dig in. So there is, there's some real stuff to sitting in a saddle that's a little dinky for your.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure nobody was happy in that situation. Okay, so out of, as you're going through your day, what are the most common saddle fitting issues that you see most often?
Number one is insufficient wither clearance. I see a lot of saddles that are way too close to the wither, and I think we all saw a lot of that in the Olympics this year. Lots of talk about it, which at least we're talking about it. I see saddles that bridge and rock. So, bridging is where essentially it's either because the saddle is too narrow for the horse or because the horse's back is too curvy for the saddle or vice versa. The tree is too straight for the horse. But that's where you only have pressure in the front and in the back, and there's a gap in the center. And then rocking is the opposite, where you have a saddle that's tipping back and forth. Um, and I will say that if a saddle is rocking on a horse statically while they're just standing there, probably not with great posture, if they lift up through that back, it's like way worse once they're in motion, I suppose.
All right, that's interesting. I have not actually had much experience with the rocking. I've definitely seen bridging a fair amount, but rocking I have not seen. So that's interesting.
Yeah, one of the signs of that when you see people go is it pops up and down. If they're trotting, you see a saddle, and there are a few reasons. That's not the only reason that a saddle pops up in the back, but it's one of them. It's just kind of popping up and down as they're posting. Sometimes
Okay.
it also does it if it's too wide and diving forward, because then it's just kind of any way that it's essentially anchored to a place because of the shape, whether that's in the center, it's going to pop up in the back.
Okay, awesome. So looking at the qualities of a well-built saddle, what are some universal qualities that show you a saddle is built well?
I'm a fan of spring trees, and there are lots of different schools of thought in the saddle fitting community about what a tree should be made out of. So that's just my preference. I think decent quality leather. Um, I personally like so many other things. I feel like saddles that are mass produced, like many products that are mass produced, are oftentimes not put together as well. Um, where the leather is sourced is part of the conversation about the quality of the leather. I've talked before about how, like leather in the UK, because it's a more temperate climate and it's moist, there's a lot of humidity and rain. There's not a lot of drastic temperature changes. The, you know, skin of the cattle tends to be a lot more supple and soft than in places where it's drier and you have extreme weather. So, and we all know like there's French leather and there's Italian leather, and that's all great too. I feel like those are, you know, it's hard to for like an average person. I feel like as fitters, we see a lot of things, and maybe I will say that you know, brands will kind of, it tends to happen when a brand, and they're not often honest about this. They get bigger and they want to cut costs in production, and they move their factory to Argentina or India or whatever. And the leather will not be as good. The trees have a tendency to break more often. So I feel like these are little murmurs that we tend to hear. But it's also kind of a dangerous world to go slandering companies in the public. If that's,
Yeah, totally.
when asked face to face, one on one, I'll be pretty forthcoming with people, but it's a little bit of a scary thing to just start shouting
Yeah, definitely. You
things
gotta
from
be
the
a certain,
treetops. Hmm.
ready for certain warfare with that one.
Hmm.
What sort of tree material is, how much does tree material play into that?
It does, because generally if they're also moving their tree factory, because some saddle companies make their trees in the same factory as the rest of the shop, and others source them from other places. So there's if they're it's another thing that's hard. It's hard for a layperson to know where the trees are coming from. But it absolutely makes a difference, and that's why, it's why you get broken trees in companies that switch to cheaper manufacturing of their trees. Mm. Mm. I can probably, you want me to answer that right now? Spring trees.
Yeah,
It's actually
definitely.
it's the type of wood. I want to say that it is um this is me. Like, I want to say that it is actually something to do with it being like spring wood or like greener wood or something like that um when it's cut. If that
Harvested,
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah, yeah. And so people will, it is kind of interesting when I'm in a lot of different like secondhand tack sales pages. Um, and people will often say like, oh, it's a spring tree, like that actually says anything about the tree other than what it's made out of. It is, that's what it's, yeah, that's what it's made out of. Spring wood.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I mean, sometimes to me that also sounds similar to the Western flex trees. Because those
Mm-hmm.
are just ones that kind of flex. So
Yes, yes,
spring
yes,
tree sounds
yes.
similar to that.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it springs. It's
Yeah.
springing.
And and it sounds like that. I mean, that's when I first heard the word, that's what I thought, like, oh yeah, it must be a springy tree. And I do think that it being cut green gives it a little bit more flexibility, but I don't, maybe not quite spring-like. Although I will also say that there are certain polymer trees, whatever type of plastic, that have varying degrees of flexibility in them. You have like the Thorogood line, the GFS line, Pessoas have a polymer tree. There's a lot of brands that, and I personally don't think there's anything wrong with those trees if they work on your horse and your horse likes it.
That's kind of what it all comes down to, really.
Yeah,
We're all here for the horses for the most part.
right. Yep.
Okay, so what areas of the horse's body need to be considered when looking for a saddle? What are the most important areas to look at? We kind of talked about, the saddle itself, but what about looking at your horse? What do you need to look at?
Yeah. Mainly, withers and back are huge, and rib, like the rib cage, the ribs play a part in that too. But I am very much looking at how high the wither is, how long the wither is um are they narrow, are they not, do they have hollows behind the wither? They're so, are they broad, what's the angle of their back, which that's a little bit more rib cage conversation. When you're looking at it like from behind, are they built like this, or are they somewhere built like that? So those are all things that I look
Can
at.
you shine a little bit of light on, I think there's just a lot of equine jargon that we use that we think we know what it means. And then when we actually learn what it means, we don't know what it means.
Mhm.
And one of those that I noticed for me was a short-backed horse or a long-backed horse. What does that really mean? And how does it impact a saddle?
Well, it very much varies because some horses look long backed, but their rib cage isn't long. It's their lumbar that's long. Um, so to me, like a true short back, but I feel like that's a thing that everybody probably has their own definition for. To me, truly a short backed horse is one whose rib cage does ends very close to, the first half of the horse and the front half of the horse. Um, and a long backed horse, I would say the opposite. And it is, the more you see this, you have your hands on a lot of horses. I mean, I always, when I'm locating the last rib, I find that bony protrusion of the pelvis, and I go from there, and I find the last rib, and it's the the difference in spacing between that varies so much. There are horses that their last rib is like this close to their pelvis, and there are horses that it's, you know, 12 inches. So
That's
that's,
so true.
yep.
Awesome. Okay, well, how can the average horse owner check to see if their saddle fits?
Okay. So wither clearance is always the first place that I look. I want 3 to 4 fingers of wither clearance with no weight in the saddle, and at least 2 with your weight in the saddle. So I want everybody to be in the habit of putting your fingers under the pommel of your saddle while you're riding and checking clearance, because that can vary in a short period of time if your horse is putting on or losing weight. So that's an easy one to fix. Angle of the tree points. I do really believe that horse owners are capable of getting that down. It does take some studying, and kind of knowing how to find your tree points and how to look at the angle where you're looking. I do post a lot of videos about that, and I try to lay it out. You want the angle of the tree points to match the angle of your horse's shoulder, not to be confused with the angle of your horse's wither, because sometimes people think that it needs to match the wither, but that's not a weight bearing area. You don't want, if it's matching your wither, it's going to be so narrow. So pressure under the panels, reach your hand under the panels, in between the panels of your horse and your horse's back, and feel for pressure points. I think everybody can do that, or a lack thereof. If you're like, oh, this feels like there's nothing in the middle. I feel it here and here, but not there. I think, if there's something really glaring, then that's easy. I feel like when you're a person who does it for a living, there are tiny little things that we can feel that may not be as glaring as an owner looking at it. Is your saddle popping up in the back? And that's something like, you have your friends take a video or your trainer take a video of you while you're riding, and you watch and you're like, oh my gosh, my saddle's popping up in the back a bunch. Some of that is normal because we know our horses' backs move a lot, and it's hard for us saddle to be completely stationary if your horse's back is moving all over the place. But I think everyone's seen it where it's just like, I'm thinking of like a flip flop, that's like not whatever. Looking at the balance of your saddle. So like put the saddle where it goes and stand back and notice you're not necessarily looking at the pommel and the cantle, because we talk about it being pommel high or cantle high, which essentially just means, is it tilted up or is it tilted down? Because you have saddles that the cantle, especially in a lot of dressage saddles, the cantle's higher than the pommel. It's supposed to be like that. And vice versa. You have some of those old saddles that have a really high pommel and like a flat seat, So where you're looking is the center of where you sit. Does that look like it's even, or is it tilting up, or is it, tilting down? I feel like those are all things that everybody can do to
That one is definitely one that takes It takes a while to look because, as you said, so many saddles are built different. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you know, I was taught to look at the seat, but like even what you said is a little bit different. It says, look where you sit. Don't necessarily look at the seat. Look where you're sitting. And
Yeah.
is that flat? And, you know, sometimes it's only a couple inches long that you're actually supposed to be judging, and then it does other things to be comfortable or whatever. So that is great information. And I think looking at a bunch of different saddles and kind of honing your eye in on that is going to be really important for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really does just take repetition. Even myself, like there's so much, it took me a while to really be able to see the tree point angle, you know, easily, etc. The same with the balance thing. That's a thing that every day that goes by, I get better and better at still. So, and I do this for a living. It is a thing that it's easy when it's really noticeable.
Yeah. Don't we wish it all was? I
Like
also love, go ahead.
I think there are certain times, like if you know that there's like a horse that's got a lower back and the back is dropped down, and whether it's older or it's not in great shape or whatever, then it's wither or shoulder. That's one of the most common times that I see a saddle that otherwise fits sit pommel high. So I feel like if you've got some of those conformational things happening, just having that in your head a little bit and knowing to look for that, those are situations where like I want to beef your panel or a half pad, a shimmable half pad. We'll get there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I also love your tip about getting a video. I mean, with my people, they send me videos and I talk to them about the body work, talk to them about what the horse is doing. And there was a time where I didn't believe that you could do that with body work, but it's been wild what I can see from a video. And it's so important. And then also, you know, sometimes I'll be videoing my own horse and I'll stop to talk to the camera and she's behind me doing something that she wouldn't do, you know, as I was working on her. So it's interesting to see how much videos can show you and teach you. You know, I also saw some things I wanted to fix in my riding position. I was like, oh, sack of potatoes much, you know? So I
Mm-hmm.
fixed
Yep.
that based off of
Yep.
video. It's
Well,
pretty
well,
important
it's
stuff.
similar. It's funny because I think there are also times for me, sometimes when I'm really struggling to see an angle, um, I'll take a photo and look at it from the photo. There's sometimes it's almost like an artist thing. This is funny too. There's a correlation in hairstyling. If you notice your hairstylist looking in the mirror and not looking at your head, there's something about looking at an image as opposed to it's like an artist taking a step back from their painting. You get blind to it sometimes when you're right up in it, and you have to like stand back and get another view. Yeah, videos and photos I think are really helpful for that.
That's so cool. I mean, I think we should just apply that to everything at this point. Just take a
Right.
photo and let me take a look at it.
Right.
That's awesome. Okay, so this next one will be fun. What's your opinion about buying used saddles and kind of recommendation between used and new? Because they are pricey little buggers.
Yeah, they're expensive. So I am absolutely not against used saddles. I think making sure they're from a reputable source, as sure as you can be. I know we live in kind of a wild world where it's hard to trust people. I know of multiple consignment tack shops that have either one or multiple saddle fitters who work for them, and those places, I would send anybody to. Because they can also, if you can probably send them a photo of your horse and they can say, well, I think that this might work, or I think that this might work, or whatever. And they're checking them, they're vetting them, they're checking the trees, they're making sure that nothing is twisted or broken, or and that's huge. um it's tricky in some of these companies that have lots of different tree shapes. It's not always stamped on the saddle, and so it's a dangerous thing to just like, oh, I want this you know, to buy a saddle not having any idea what, especially if it's somebody who's a rider who's selling it who doesn't really know all the details about it. Um, it can get, you know, I mean, if you're lucky and you have 1 cent and it fits, great. And I think it can also, and that's another good thing though about a lot of the consignment companies is that they have, many of them have a trial period, which I think that you absolutely need to try it. There's, you know, not hardly a horse in the world that somebody can look at a picture of and guarantee that that saddle's going to fit. I mean, even in fittings, when I bring demos, there are times that I go in, I look at the horse, and I'm like, this is what tree I'm going to start with, and I put it on, and it's like, oh nope, I was wrong. I'm move on to that tree. So it it can get expensive, but I also understand. Um, I understand they are expensive. I see a lot of people though, and this is I'm probably going into a little bit of a pet peeve early. This has been happening. This has been happening lately where, and I sell a number of saddles online. People have very specific things that they're looking for in a saddle, but they want to use saddle. And I feel like 90% of the time, if you're looking at used saddles, you're going to probably have to budge on one of those things that you want when you want a short flap or you want, you know, whatever. But I feel like I see a lot of people out there who want a used saddle, but they want it to all of their specs. Which I mean, and if that's, maybe you will find one someday. You know, and great if you do, but it might take you 2 years. So,
You're in for the long haul on that one.
yeah, I mean, I do kind of feel like if you've got some really specific things, try looking on the used market. Good luck to you, but chances are you're going to have to probably suck it up and buy a custom saddle, you know, which
Yeah,
is, you know,
you kind of, well, as you said before, you're going to kind of get what you pay for also.
you do.
And
Yeah.
because saddle fit is so important and saddle itself is important for the rider and the horse, that's definitely something to be investing in. I
Yeah.
mean, we can cut some corners on what color halter you get and stuff like that, but saddles are pretty important.
Yeah. And it's tricky. You know, I have a lot of people reach out to me and want me to come do a fitting and then tell them what kind of saddle to buy because they want a used one. And it it's a pretty, unless I'm they're specifically looking for something that I have that I carry that I put on that horse and that I know that fits it, it is very, it's pretty much impossible for me to say that to somebody with all assurance. Hopefully that
Yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
understandable for sure.
Yeah. I
Okay,
truly
awesome.
like, I want to be able to do it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wish that I could.
We could just make this happen for you. I'd try.
Yes.
All right. What girths often get forgotten about? And so I know we had a question on girths, but when it comes to saddle fit, what's important in regards to girth and what about pads?
Yeah. So, as far as girths go, I am very much start with a straight girth, and if that doesn't work, then we fix it. You know, we figure something else out. Um, there are a couple body types that I will go in and be know that it's going to be a struggle, and that we should, you know, you some thoroughbreds and even some warm bloods that have a very angled shoulder and where the saddle places is like pretty far back, but their girth groove is way far forward and no billets really go quite that far forward. That's a horse that I'd probably just start out with a shoulder relief girth or something like that. But and similarly, you know, when we were talking about the Arabians and other breeds do this too, but there's a portion of them that have um especially if they've got, you're the mutton back, they've got really low wide withers, and paired with like not a very wide shoulder, sometimes their shoulders narrower than their, or like the front of their shoulder is narrower than where they are where the saddle goes, and then they've got a really sprung rib cage and a very forward girth groove. um then I would probably start out with like a crescent shaped girth or something on a horse like that. So Otherwise, otherwise start with the straight girth. I think that so much of the horse world has been taught to put their girths too far forward. In general, you want you want four fingers in between your horse's elbow and where the girth goes while the horse is standing, not while their leg is forward or whatnot. I did see somebody post about asking about a rear cinch, and I don't think it's necessary. Always. And it's not necessary unless it is. That's another thing where, like, is your saddle flapping all over the place? I think a lot of the time it's like if you're roping or you're doing barrel racing or you're doing that kind of stuff, you need extra stability, then that's one thing. But if you're not doing that stuff, if your saddle's flopping up and down in the back, you've got a fit issue. And so, you know, the rear cinch is not gonna cure that, I suppose. Hopefully that was helpful. But if you're
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's definitely been taught that if, like, oh, the saddle's flapping, we'll put a rear cinch on it, suck that sucker down. And it's like, yeah, rear cinches are for, extreme movement, like you said. And then
yeah,
I also think about trail riding where you're going down a hill like
if
this.
you're like on some mountains and doing some, you know what I mean, some serious or whatever, you're going down
Exactly.
ravines.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys are
Totally.
in that kind of an area.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
you're in the flatlands, aren't you?
And I guess yes, I am. There is one other one other thing. Although I will say that we have bluffs where I am, and I do live in the bluffs, so
Bluffs.
they're called bluffs.
That's cute.
So it's pretty hilly. This was so each horse, back to the girth conversation, every horse has a girth groove. And so that's another thing that we can all kind of get accustomed to looking for on our horse. There is legitimately a groove that goes down past, on the side of the belly, ribs. And if there's a situation where, well, my horse's girth groove is really far forward, I can't have a hand in between, then that's another situation where either an ergonomically shaped or a shoulder relief girth is a good solution. And they can also, I feel like people talk about this. You want to make sure as much as possible that the pressure in your girth is as even as possible, because sometimes you'll see it to where it's like it's tight on one side but gaping on another. And if the shoulder relief girths don't fit perfectly, they can do that. And what happens then is that, like, all of the tension and pressure is in a pretty small place, which can definitely make them sore. And we see, like, in why are words so hard? We see the fascia adhesion in those situations. Not that it can't happen just with over tightening your girth and stuff too, but blah blah blah.
Yeah, it was interesting. Last time we were talking, you used the word girth groove, and I don't think I had heard that before. And so it made me pay a lot more attention to that. And so I went out and looked at my three horses. They are all so different, and it's really wild. And then also with this little Arabian that I just got, that my saddle doesn't fit, nothing like that. He has the smallest little chest, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is going to be like a bra strap just hitting you on the shoulder for that girth. So I'm concerned about that because you're literally just cinching up on this little tiny part of his ribs right at the sternum there. And I thought,
Yeah,
oh, that's going to
yeah,
be
like
tough on
ouch.
him.
What if you try one of those tapestry ones? Have you seen those? The tapestry girths.
Oh, yeah.
That might be
Okay.
it. That might be a thing.
All right, right on. Yeah, so I mean, we could do it a whole different Zoom on girths, I think.
Right.
What do you think about pads? Tell
Oh yeah,
us.
so pads. I am definitely here for shimmable half pads. I very much believe in shimmable half pads. I really like the Pro Light pads. There's Bliss carries a similar design. They've done a lot of science behind. If any of you guys have heard for that, I want to say it's open cell foam. They've done a lot of science on the pressure relief that it does. Um, they also have, like, peer reviewed, non-biased scientists doing their testing which, you know, is a lot, definitely more than a lot of companies can say, because a lot of companies come out and they swear by all of these things and laboratory tested, and it's like not real by their, you know. Some of them, like one of them is kind of famous for dropping a bowling ball on the pad, because it doesn't bounce as much, it like absorbs the pressure. But impact, so that's like a measure of impact. That impact is only a very small part of what our weight is doing on them. Like pressure distribution is a way bigger factor. So I will
Well, I
say
mean, it worked for the mattress company, so they had to give that a
they
try
had to
on the
try
saddle
it
pads. Like, we're
out.
just gonna stick to good quality marketing, right?
Yes, I will say, and wool, I mean, wool is my second favorite. And there's been a lot of testing. Wool does actually help relieve a lot of the impact and pressure. The hard nose for me, or anything with gel or memory foam, those have proven to actually compress where there is the most pressure. They create more pressure. They harden and create more pressure in the areas that you need it to relieve the pressure, if that makes sense. And I don't know, like I'm kind of a delicate flower. So if you've ever, when I lay on a memory foam mattress, I get pressure, like where my hip is, if I'm laying on my side, and that's like one of the deepest points, I get really sore. Um, and that kind of helps that make sense in my brain. I don't know if I'm like one of the only people who that happens to, but
Well, that's wild because I have always thought, oh, the gel's got to be the best. The gel's got to be the best. So that's
mm-hmm.
awesome.
Yeah. So, and having our horses do change, and having a shimmable half pad, so you have a little bit of control. Say your saddle fitter can't get, like my horse has dropped weight, or my saddle's fitting too close, the wool has compressed. Being able to shim it in the meanwhile to keep your horse comfortable, I feel like is really a really important thing to be able to do.
Well, and I mean, bravo to those of you who have horses that do not change weight during the seasons, because mine goes from porky potbelly there to, oh, we got to go get some alfalfa. I'll be right back. So
Yeah, yeah,
definitely an issue.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's awesome. So this is kind of one of my fun questions that I like to do. I did this with the hoof care one also. What are the qualities of a good saddle fitter? So if I'm going to have a saddle fitter come out, what's something that I should expect from them? What are some characteristics that they should have that show that they are really in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think knowing about their education is important. And knowing that their education is not just brand specific, that they actually received an education that was broader, I think is huge. The SMS is really popular. That's the Society of Master Saddle Fitters. It's out of the UK. And I know you guys have got a couple fitters who are SMS qualified in your area. I was telling Aaron earlier that I shadowed Thais. If anyone has worked with Thais before out there, I actually shadowed her for 2 long days as a part of my observation hours for the program that I attended. I mean, you want to know that they do a thorough job. Are they, I watched the horse walk. I want to see the horse walk and trot in hand. You're palpating. You're looking, I do an assessment all over of the horse's symmetry before we even look at a saddle. And I feel like those are important things. And, I feel like all of it is, we're just gathering information. Not one thing of any of this is, a little pieces of things that we're gathering. I think that it's important for somebody not to push saddles on you. And reps, I feel like there's a lot of saddle reps that are pushy, and they tend to only have brand specific education. Not that there are no independent fitters who I don't want to say went to the dark side, but for the most part, their education is brand specific, and they're a salesperson, and you can tell because they're pushy. There is a difference, like us independent fitters. I feel like we usually stock saddles. We have to buy all our own stock. We basically had to buy into the company more or less by buying stock. And we do that because we have to. The only way oftentimes to find a saddle that fits a horse is to carry a line of saddles that has different tree shapes. Otherwise you'd be playing that game of used saddles and you'd be waiting for saddles to get shipped and you'd be making 10 trips to people to figure out if a saddle worked. So, generally I'm like, well, these are the lines that I carry and this is what the cost of them is, what falls into your budget. We can look at these. This is what I have for solutions as far as so I feel like there's a difference between that and, going in and pushing for a sale.
Yeah, I've seen some saddles pushed on some people that didn't fit. And it was really irritating because it was a price bump for the seller. And it was just like, gosh darn it,
Yeah, it's
And
really sad.
well, the thing is, as horse owners, we are not professionals in that area. So we are going to people that are
You're trusting
professional.
people. You're trusting
Yeah.
people. And it makes me so upset for people who, especially when you get into those saddles that are $6,000 to $8,000, that not ever one single time fit the horse that it was custom made for. I see it all the time. And then your horse has atrophy, and I mean, it's maddening. And then I'm just that person. I feel guilty for being like, I'm so sorry this doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Have to fork over another $3,000 or what.
I mean, I've said it to my clients. I'm like, listen, I'm just going to be honest. Your saddle doesn't fit, but we just got it. They said they fit it. I apologize for them lying to you, but it does not.
Most of them, there's no, you have to kind of play hardball if you want to get a refund or anything like that. And I mean, I have a good friend who's a lawyer, and we have a friend who ordered a custom French saddle and it never fit that horse at all. And then the rep disappeared and it was a whole thing. And, my lawyer friend had to get involved in order for anything to happen. So it's possible, but it's unlikely. You have to,
Get aggressive.
Yep.
Okay, so now my favorite question of all time. What are pet peeves of saddle fitters? Tell us everything that we need to know to not make our saddle fitters mad.
I think expecting saddle fitters to fix like training issues, whether it's the horse or the rider. I mean, there are absolutely a saddle should help you in your position, but if you've been riding with your leg way out ahead of you for 10 years or however many years, you're going to have to fix that muscle memory, even if the saddle puts you in a better place. And maybe it's not as bad because the saddle puts you in a better place, but yeah, so that's a big one. I've had clients who I've done fittings for who, over the process of doing the fitting, having the trial saddle out, kind of tweaking, ensuring that we're going to order the perfect custom fit, horse drops 100 pounds. And then I go, whoa, we got to change tree shapes now. And then horse drops another 100 pounds. And, I'm expected to order this horse a saddle that's going to fit it through 200 pounds of weight change. Which it's just like, I can't promise that if this horse puts back on the 200 pounds that it just lost, that this saddle's going to fit it anymore. So either you have to, yes. So there's definitely, we're not miracle workers in that respect. It's just not, when a horse loses top line, it tends to curve more through the back. That's one of the biggest things. And when they have a nice top line, they tend to straighten out better. And just that front to back curve is a huge, there are different trees shaped for those different, for those different shapes.
Yeah. And it seems like, people need to be aware that you need to get that top line back on that horse. Or, 200 pounds is a lot.
It's a lot.
I
It's a
mean,
lot.
to humans, we don't lose 50 pounds and walk around in the same clothes. We change our
Mm-mm.
clothes because them
Mm-hmm.
clothes ain't gonna fit.
Mm-hmm.
So same situation with a
Something's
saddle.
going on. Yeah. And even if it is, this person that I'm talking about, it's like a 17-2 horse, but even still, that's a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight if I had to change tree shapes, not just width, but full tree shape to make this work. So, yes. Um, I've had it, I've had it happen a couple times where I go to a fitting and it's like stormy and the walls are shaking and it's loud in the arena because we all have indoor arenas here and it's scary and the horse is spooky and whatever, and I've had clients be like, like, oh, he doesn't like the saddle. Like, well, I think there are too many variables here. And those are situations where honestly I'd rather just come back, like, let's just do this another day so the variables are less and we can actually see what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought of that. That's a good point. Because I mean, I just do my horses whenever. So, but saddle fit, you got to gauge their behavior also.
You do. Well, and there are times, and my horse is one of them. My horse, he's an appy. So he has an aptitude and he's very vocal. And so there are a lot of horses that when you're in the trial process and you untack them and tack them back up, that after you do that like 2 times, and sometimes even between the first and the second, sometimes between the third and the fourth, they're like, what? Like, you took my saddle off. I went back. Like, you want me to work again? And sometimes it can be difficult to gauge their response when they've got some of that stuff going on.
Yeah, we call that running out of quarters. They're just out of
Mhm.
quarters.
Yeah,
They've had
exactly.
enough. They do that
Understandable.
massage too. So,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
understandable. I mean, it's the same. And we talked before when I know there are fitters and there's the same as farriers who have really strong feelings about horses that like bite or kick or whatever. And I mean, I do not love being kicked at. I have been kicked at lots and lots of times because generally there are many times that if I'm there, it's because there are issues. Um, and so I don't want to be kicked at, but I also am like, I clearly need to be here. So I just do my best to keep myself safe and try to assure the horse that this is this is going to be helpful. you
Yeah,
know
you'll thank me later. You'll thank me later, I promise.
right, and then sometimes it still takes 6 months before they trust you know trust a saddle again, even after they've been being ridden in one that fits.
Well, one thing that I tell my people is that you have to have a body worker out after you've had an ill-fitting saddle for a long time, and now you have a new saddle that fits. You have to get their body set back up for success
Yeah,
because they have so many, incorrect muscle memories going on. Their body's like, their scapulas are held up by their withers, and they just have a ton of body work that needs to be done in order for
yeah,
them to reset. It's
yeah,
wild.
all the things they're going around inverted and all of the trying to evade, and it does take time. I mean, if of course I love it when people are like, you know what, I'm going to take this back to groundwork for a little while.
That
I
would be
love
the best move for
I
sure.
love to hear that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then how often do you think you should have a saddle fitter out?
I think it varies by how much you ride. So are you a once or twice a week person? Once a year. If you're a person who, maybe rides three or more times a week. This also depends on what type of saddle, you're riding in. Are you riding like Wolflock saddles do compress over time? So that is if you feel like, and this both goes hand in hand. Does your horse's shape change? Have they put on weight or lost weight? That's maintaining. I mean, sometimes like I feel like it happens sometimes like a week, like, oh, my horse looks kind of thin this week, and the next week it's like, oh, they're fine, you know. Um, but what was I gonna say? Also, if you regardless of any weight change that they have or shape changes, are you feeling like the pommel's getting too close? Because sometimes that can happen with the wool compressing or whatnot. So anytime there's an issue, call your saddle fitter. People who are pros or, who are riding 5 days a week, quarterly. I think it's important. So really anytime quarterly to annually, I think is, um, I do think it's good. I do think it's good for your saddle fitter to, if at all possible, see your horse in the summer and see them in the winter. Especially just so they can be familiar with what their shape does during those times. So then they can give you some recommendations on like, well, when this happens, these are the shims I want you to use. Because I'll do that with the shimmable half pad. I love to tell people exactly which shims to use for what's going on with their specific horse. I'll leave instructions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, my shape changes throughout the year too, so I think that's just good
Same.
information.
Same.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's fantastic. So I noticed we have a lot of questions, so let's go through those and we'll talk about those real quick. And if you have more questions and you want to say them, we can do that after we go through the ones in the chat. So I think we answered Melinda's question about how you feel about shimmable saddle pads. You are 2 thumbs up?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Where Nadine asked, where should the cinch be on each side of the horse?
Well, yeah, this is an interesting question. Back to the definitely a hand behind the elbow, but there are a lot of horses who are asymmetrical. My horse is one of them. So his girth is always further back on one side than the other, just because of his asymmetry. There are things that asymmetry, if it affects the way the saddle moves on the horse, then I mess with it, but I don't generally mess with the girth too much. Because I feel like really the idea is keeping things as even as possible so your horse will grow into the symmetry. Because if you do too much asymmetrically, then this isn't always true because there are times that you have to, for a period of time, shim asymmetrically. That's not a girth conversation though, really. I have yet to have a situation where I wanted to girth the saddle different on one side. And that's probably not even what you're asking, but I went there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is also, and then you kind of said it should be equal on both sides, right? Because in the Western world, there's this whole thing about if the girth is too short, it's going to hit that vein that's really
And it's similar
low,
in the dressage world. It's similar in the dressage world. You do like in dressage, and I feel like with Western also, you actually do want the girth up higher than the midline of the belly, if possible. And that's how you have that bundle of nerves also. That's kind of in that precarious place in between like the ribs and the chest. It's hard for me to, is a thing that you want to at least avoid with the buckle and too much pressure. I don't know.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Did that answer your question, Nadine? Good. Okay. Melinda says, I have a short back quarter horse. I used to ride a reiner and thinking that would sit me right on her kidneys. I am riding her in an HR ranch cutting, sitting me more forward.
That's probably helpful. Yeah. I mean, and that's a big conversation. I see this both in dressage saddles and Western saddles. It's especially important if your horse has a short back and if you're concerned that the rear of the tree, because we have skirts in Western. And so obviously we're not so much paying attention to the skirt as we are the back of the seat. If that is very close to the 18th vertebrae and your saddle has a rear balance point, I feel like you're in scary territory to have too much pressure in an area that's really delicate and easily damaged. They can get sore there pretty easily. So I think it's great that you're in a saddle that has a more forward balance point. Yeah, it does make me go, when I see some of the saddles that, yeah, there are some Western saddles that really are like, they have that, they're way up at the front and the balance point is way in the back.
Yeah,
If
things
you
that
have a
make you
horse with
feel.
the back to carry it, and I think that that's okay, but
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
yeah.
We talked about the back cinch for Nadine's other question already. Oh, this is an excellent one. I get this question all the time. Michelle asked, I'm curious about treeless saddles and bareback pad saddles. Tell us everything.
Okay, so I struggle a little bit with treeless saddles. Now, my mind could be changed if I saw some that were successful in not putting too much pressure on the horse's wither. But in general, the purpose of the tree is to build up and protect the wither and the horse's spine. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but I have trust issues with treeless saddles for that reason. It doesn't make sense in my head how you could possibly protect the wither with something that doesn't have a tree. I do know people who swear by them. I have not actually done a fitting with one that I could look at the horse and say, oh, this horse's back looks great. So I have nothing but my own theories to back that up. What was the
Same question regards to the like saddle pads with stirrups, bareback
oh yeah,
pads.
so I think the bareback pads are great. I would rather see anybody who's going to ride bareback ride on one of those to protect them a little bit. Do I think it protects a ton? No, but what are you doing? Are you going on a 20-mile ride, or are you just kind of dinking around? But I'm really never okay with the ones that have stirrups, because basically where those stirrups attach just pull right down in a very, I mean, how thin is that? Whatever leather, that the stirrup is attached to, it's usually pretty thin. And there's not enough protection there to protect their wither back, wherever that's placed on there. So I feel like if you're going to do a bareback pad, suck it up and no stirrups for you.
You're gonna go hard or go
Yeah.
home. That's it. All right, there you go, guys. All right, Sylvia says, what is your recommendation if the horse does have the big indentations behind the withers? So shims, maybe, she says.
It really depends very much on what's going on with the saddle. So, also, I mean, diet, exercise. I think there's some really good, if you can try to, oftentimes it it may not be completely abatable, but I think that oftentimes there can be improvements. Like targeted diet. I worked with a nutritionist at Mad Barn, and there's lots of nutritionists out there. I was leasing a horse last year who had a lacking top line, and she came thin and under muscled, and top line was not good. And we put a bunch of weight on her in, the first like month or two, but she still was lacking top line. And I ended up talking to a nutritionist, and it turned out that she was getting too much protein. And so we tweaked her diet, and legitimately within 2 weeks, her top line filled out. It was wild. So, I mean, the people at Mad Barn do a dietary analysis for free. And obviously they have supplements and stuff that they recommend. So you're going into it knowing that they're likely, if there's like a nutrition or like a vitamin mineral deficiency in whatever you're feeding, they're probably going to recommend their products, whether or not you take them up on that, and there's so many great exercises. That book, 55 Corrective Exercises, and there's so many others out there. Pole work, in hand, mounted, hill work, whether you're like serpentining on hills, backing up hills.
Does that work also with bluffs? Or is it just?
It does work with bluffs. So, I mean, and without knowing really what's going on with your, if your saddle is diving forward because of it, maybe you would shim up the front, but you always have to keep in mind that you do not want it to create too much pressure, because if you're putting too much pressure there, you don't want the point of the balance of the saddle coming from there, because they're never going to be able to grow that muscle back while there's too much pressure on it. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
So it
that's
might
perfect.
be a
And
situation where you shim up the back and not the front, or like the back, not just the back, like really the whole body, just not the front. That's why the shimmable pads that have the 3 shims, front, middle, and back, I think are important. So you can do the middle and the back and not the front. Sometimes, if it helps, and sometimes you just have to try it and actually feel underneath before the pad and feel underneath with the pad, because there's always a difference when you put the pad.
yeah, trial and error for sure
Yeah.
is scary, but necessary
And
sometimes.
it is common, and a lot of horses, like, they lose, it's like us, we lose a little bit of weight, and it tends to go from the same places first, whatever. So yeah, hopefully it can. I feel like people can be amazed though at how much really targeted nutrition and exercise can be just like amazing.
Well,
Amazing.
nutrition for sure is wild. It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
So I've experienced that myself. Melinda said, can you post the name of the shim half pad? My horse
Yeah.
is rebuilding after quarantine.
Yeah.
We're also going to talk, Melinda, and all of you, we're going to talk at the end about where you guys can follow Jen and shoot questions to her also if you want. So, what was the name of that half pad that you like?
Prolite. So it's Prolite.
That's easy
They're
enough.
great.
Cool.
Yep. And actually Thais carries them there. So you guys have a local person who carries them.
Well, you know what's funny is I would say probably half of the people here are around closer to you than they are to me.
Oh,
So
are they? Are we from all over the place?
yeah, we're everywhere. We're everywhere.
And actually, you
We're
can
spread
find them.
out.
You can't order them from the company, but you can order them from distributors. So, if you just go in, oh, hi, that's great. Missouri, we're close. And the same with the Bliss ones. I'm actually getting a shipment of Bliss pads in soon. So legitimately, if you can't find them, then I can ship you one. So hopefully next week the Bliss pads will come in.
Right on. Cool. All right. Good. You guys can hook up then. Lorraine asked, my horse is extremely wide quarter horse. What is the best type of saddle? Lorraine, you got one of them double wides too, huh?
Right. What kind of riding do you do?
You can unmute if you'd like, Lorraine.
I mostly do Western riding, trail riding. I'm starting to try to do some Western dressage with her.
Fun. So there are 2 companies. And this is another thing, kind of going back to, when saddles are mass produced, the quality tends to not be great. So I can't really recommend any of the really big well-known companies, because I don't think their quality is that good, and I don't think their tree options are actually that great as far as their different tree shapes go. But there are 2 companies. One is called Steele, Steele, and one is, and I can send this to anybody or we can get this updated. And one of them is called Allegheny Mountain Saddlery. Those are both companies that have lots of different tree shapes. They actually have a system. It's called like the Fit to Be Soon system, where they'll send you, they have fiberglass molds that are shaped like different back shapes, that they basically represent the different tree shapes. So both of them have like a long distance system that they'll use, that you can send them photos of your horse. They'll send you a few of the different molds, and you decide which one fits the best. And I'm actually pretty sure that if you called a saddle fitter, if you could find one, they would help you if you felt unsure about that process. And they would actually make a tree to or, you know, make the saddle to the actual tree that you would need. Hopefully that's not an answer you didn't want to hear.
Well, I've had a hard time finding a saddle fitter near where I live.
Yeah, where are you?
I live about an hour away from Austin, Texas.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Wouldn't you think there'd be saddle fitters? Funny enough, I'm going to be in Austin in like 6 days.
Hey, hook up. Get her
I
phone
would,
number.
I'll live in town for a week, or I would, if you're going to be around after the 18th, I would definitely hook up.
It's only the 12th through the 15th. Actually, we're going for a wedding.
Oh, well, that makes it harder.
It does. It
But
makes it a little bit tricky, but I do think that both, and I'm happy to help virtually with anything. And also, I think that both of those companies have a pretty good system in place to kind of walk you through what you need to do. So, so hopefully you would be able to, you know, figure something out with them, but I'm happy to send you the information.
that would be great. And how did you spell the second one?
It's Allegheny. Let me look it up because I think I have spelled it wrong before. Give me 2 seconds.
I do
Okay.
that all the time.
Oh, there
Don't
you
ask
go.
me how to spell muscles.
Okay, so it's ALLEGANY Saddlery. And if it's, yeah, their website is AlleganySaddlery.com.
Okay. Well, great. If I have somebody who can help me long distance, that would be
Yeah,
great. Cause she's definitely, she's got a
like
wide,
extra wide.
yes. And the extra wide quarter horse saddles that I bought stock,
Yeah,
they don't fit right. I
yeah.
haven't found anything that fits right. And I've been through 5 saddles now.
Oh my goodness. Well, and that, yeah, there just comes a point. Honestly, I feel like compared to the English world, I want to say the Allegheny saddles are like in the 2s and 3s a lot of the time, like thousands, which I, you know, I know it's not, it could be so much worse than that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of leather involved. I mean, you know, to me, that's not a crazy exorbitant amount of money for a custom saddle. And once again, when you look at their website, their saddles are really lovely.
Well,
So,
I can see that is not bad for a custom saddle.
yeah, I'll carry them someday. I'll get there.
Well, I might check that out too, but hey, Lorraine, everything's bigger in Texas, so you know that, right? That's not our fault.
So they say.
Okay, awesome. Well, Jenny says I have a 25-year-old Appy built like a 2-year-old. The only saddle I could find that was a decent fit is a treeless. So we have one pro treeless person here. And Jenny, we're gonna fly Jennifer out and she's gonna confirm or deny your claim.
Let me,
okay?
that it works.
Now you've said it, so now we're gonna test it. Yeah. I have heard pros and cons also. I do not have an opinion because I haven't looked at them enough to know
Yeah,
either.
it's a thing. That's kind of mine. It's like I have trust issues, but I can't say anything definitively.
Okay, awesome. Oh, she didn't like it on the halflinger though, so yeah, breed specific, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all we have for questions. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to shoot out? Unmute, feel free. I'll give you 5 seconds. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jen. This has been a whirlwind of an hour. We did good. We did an hour and a half, so that's fantastic.
Not bad.
Good job. Can you please tell everyone here where we can get a hold of you, where we can watch your videos, where we can learn more from you? We would love to hear how to internet stalk you, which is what I did.
That's great. I love it. So it's pretty much universal across all social medias. I have an Instagram, a Facebook, a TikTok, all under High Plains Saddle Fitting, and a website under the same. There's like an email option on the website, but you know, I pretty much keep on top of as well as I can amongst the busy days to get return messages, you know, I check it. I check all the messages across them regularly. I do appreciate you guys so much. I'm so happy that you guys are into it and curious.
Yes, thank you. Thanks
willing
for
to
showing
listen
up,
and ramble.
everyone. This is fantastic. Obviously, something we all could learn more about. So definitely everything I had hoped for. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jen, so much for coming. We appreciate you. And hey, maybe we should do this again sometime.
I think so. I think so. Thanks so much for
Sounds
having
good.
me.
Yes, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.